Why was she the only one not called by name? The roll call echoed through the command center like a ritual. 60 names, 60 affirmations, voices sharp and confident as soldiers answered. But not hers. She stood near the back, close enough to feel the weight of the room, yet distant enough to be overlooked again. The Admiral's voice cut through the silence after the last response. "We don't move without her." Heads turned. Eyes followed. The ignored woman, now illuminated in a way that felt less like recognition and more like exposure. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to pause, as if stunned that Harrison, silver-haired, weathered by decades of wars both visible and hidden, had broken the silence in her favor. She didn't move at first, didn't breathe, didn't let the flicker of pride that threatened to surface show on her face, because in rooms like this, pride was dangerous. Pride could be used against you. Her name was Morgan, 31 years old, naval officer by commission, but her real role existed in the shadows, a strategist who had built systems that saved lives without ever receiving credit for them. Her intelligence briefs were often filed under other names, her innovations folded into programs with no mention of their true architect. Institutional invisibility, her grandfather had taught her the skill, and she had mastered it. But tonight, invisibility was no longer possible. On the wall-sized display, the crisis unfolded in chilling detail. Azerbaijan, the U.S. Embassy in Baku, 12 diplomats bound, hooded, held in a room rigged with explosives. A countdown already running, each red digit shrinking the margin for hope. The earlier advanced team, America's best, had been shredded in an ambush that should have been impossible. Precision fire, perfect timing. Whoever orchestrated it knew every play in the American playbook. The tactical commander, Colonel, clung to his authority with the grim arrogance of a man who measured worth in battlefield scars. He saw as an intruder, a theorist without blood on her hands. He didn't hide his disdain, and when she spoke, clear, precise, fearless, he dismissed it with the wave of a decorated hand. But she kept speaking, because silence would kill more men. "They're not improvising," she told them. Her voice was steady, though her pulse hammered against her ribs. "They're following a playbook, the exact Soviet Department V protocol for embassy takeovers. 1978, Morocco, same vectors, same traps, same 36-hour deadline." Some of the younger operators shifted uncomfortably. They weren't old enough to remember the Cold War except as half-forgotten lessons in dusty manuals, but bristled, his jaw hardening. "You're suggesting terrorists in Azerbaijan have access to Soviet black files that were never—" Didn't blink. "No, Colonel, I'm suggesting something worse. I'm suggesting the Cold War never ended. It just fell asleep. And tonight," she pointed at the screen, at the men dying in loops of replayed footage, "it woke up." The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Inside fought her own war, the familiar war of being unheard, of being underestimated, of carrying the weight of lives no one would credit her for saving. She had lived in that silence since Annapolis, since her first day in uniform when whispers followed her like shadows. Morgan's granddaughter. The Cold War spy's orphan. The girl who doesn't belong. But she did belong, more than any of them. Her father had died in Beirut, her mother with him. Her grandfather had raised her on a Virginia farm that doubled as an intelligence archive. She had grown up with stories coded into chess games, with survival lessons disguised as childhood chores. She had learned to move silently through barns as if they were safe houses, to memorize escape routes the way other children memorized nursery rhymes. Invisible but prepared, always prepared. Now, in the harsh fluorescent light of the command center, all of that preparation pressed against her ribs like a secret she wasn't sure she could contain much longer. The Admiral's voice broke the silence again. "Lieutenant Commander Morgan will join the planning cell, effective immediately." His nostrils flared, but he saluted sharply. Orders were orders. Didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She walked to the table, laid down her files, and let the screen fill with overlays she had prepared weeks ago, warnings buried in bureaucratic drawers until the crisis proved her right. As she spoke, connecting Morocco, 78 to Azerbaijan, now she saw their skepticism bend toward unease. She didn't want to win an argument. She wanted to save the men still breathing and the 12 still bound. That was all. But beneath the mission map, another map ran in her mind, the one no one else saw. A shadow map. The memory of her grandfather whispering a name like a curse, years before he died, Prometheus. She had never understood it, not fully. Just fragments in journals, notes in margins, warnings written in a hand steadier than his last years had been. The one operation we never stopped, one entry had said. The one fire still burning beneath the ashes. And now, watching red dots cluster around the embassy schematic, felt the truth in her bones. This wasn't just about 12 diplomats. This was about something deeper, older, alive beneath the surface. She didn't tell them that, not yet. They weren't ready to hear it. Instead, she kept her voice measured. If we proceed with standard vectors, you'll walk into the same trap that killed your advanced team. This isn't improvisation. It's design. And the design was written long before we stepped into this room. A Delta Force captain spoke quietly from the back. She's right. The precision was unnatural. They knew exactly where we'd land. Said nothing. His silence was an admission he couldn't make in words. When the briefing ended, the operators filed out, their faces set in grim concentration. Some glanced at with new respect. Others avoided her eyes. Recognition was uncomfortable when it upset the order of things. Admiral Harrison lingered. His ice-blue gaze softened for the first time that night. "Your father would be proud," he said. "Both of them." The words struck deeper than she expected. She nodded once, afraid her voice would betray her. As she gathered her files, a flicker in the hallway caught her attention. A man watching too intently, posture wrong for casual staff. Civilian clothes but a soldier's bearing. She turned sharply, but he was gone. The same shape she had seen earlier, outside her window, before Harrison's call pulled her into this storm. Coincidence was never coincidence. His fingers brushed the grip of the PPK she kept hidden in her bag, a relic of her grandfather's Berlin days. Regulation said she shouldn't even have it. Survival said otherwise. She walked out of the command center with steady steps, though her mind was already calculating routes, mirrors, reflective surfaces. Every instinct sharpened. The mission was already in motion. But so was something else. She thought of the Admiral's words again, "We don't move without her." The irony was cruel. They hadn't wanted to move with her at all, not until the ghosts of the Cold War forced them to. And somewhere, out there in the night, someone was already moving against her. How do you trust a man who already buried your warnings once? The question hovered in his mind as she walked the dim service corridor toward Admiral Harrison's private office. She moved with the caution of habit, scanning reflections, counting steps, noting exits. Not paranoia. Pattern. Years of training under her grandfather had taught her that survival wasn't an instinct. It was discipline. The corridor was empty, the hum of the signal jammers low and steady, masking the vibrations of classified conversations within. When Harrison called her to the side entrance, it wasn't just discretion. It was protection, and protection was never offered lightly in this world. Inside, Harrison was already bent over satellite imagery, the weight of decades visible in the slope of his shoulders. Beside him stood Major Elizabeth Walker, Air Force, operations specialist, sharp eyes that missed nothing. A professional ally, perhaps, or another mask she couldn't yet read. "You predicted this," Harrison said without looking up. "Every entry point, every timeline exactly." Set her files down, her voice calm. "Pattern recognition, sir." Now he did look up, his gaze sharp under silver brows. For a moment, it wasn't an admiral looking at her. It was an old soldier measuring the value of truth against the cost of disbelief. Walker sealed the room with a device disguised as a coffee maker. "Clear," she reported. Only then did Harrison reach into a hidden drawer and place a single photograph on the desk. A black-and-white image, Beirut, 1983. A younger Harrison stood between two men, her father, Thomas, and her grandfather, Thomas, weeks before both Morgans had been killed in the embassy bombing. "I've kept your position protected for 7 years," Harrison said quietly. "The anonymity that allowed you to develop the Morgan protocol. But after tonight, we can't afford shadows anymore." His fingers hovered over the photograph but didn't touch. A rare tremor passed through her. Her father's face, familiar in pictures but never in memory, looked back at her. Beside him, her grandfather, unyielding, a man who had trained her not with lullabies but with escape drills. "My effectiveness comes from invisibility," she said. "3 good men died tonight," Harrison cut her off, "and I strongly suspect it's just the beginning. Something worse is moving, something your grandfather warned me about." One word rose to her lips like an old scar reopening: Prometheus. The Admiral's head snapped up. "How do you know that name?" "His journals admitted. References only, no details, just fragments, warnings." Harrison exchanged a glance with Walker, the kind that spoke of conversations already had behind locked doors. Then he leaned closer. "Your grandfather feared it. A Department V design, built to outlive the Soviet Union itself." The words tasted like metal in his mouth. She thought of the ambush, precision so exact it seemed choreographed, of the shadow at her window, of the man in the hallway watching her with the stillness of a predator. "You're saying this is a sleeper," she said. "Not just a leak, a decades-old operation waking up." "That's exactly what I'm saying." Harrison's voice carried no dramatics, just fact. "And you're the only one who recognized the pattern soon enough to stop it." But recognition was dangerous. Already, she felt the unseen weight of eyes on her. "Won't listen," she said. "This time," Harrison replied, "he doesn't have a choice. You're joining his team." The air tightened. Would fight her every step, not because of logic but because of ego. He would see her as a threat to his authority, not as a chance to save lives. And that made him more dangerous than the men with rifles in Baku. "Sir," she began. Harrison cut her off with a single sentence. "Lieutenant Commander, your father would be proud." The words almost broke her, almost. She left the office with Walker, silence stretching between them until Walker finally said, "You know we'll target you." Managed a faint smile. "I'm used to being underestimated." Walker studied her. She said at last, "Call me." The briefing room was thick with tension. His blood-stained sleeve bore silent testimony to the men he'd already lost. He spoke with authority sharpened by grief, laying out vectors, insertion points, standard tactics. Predictable, exactly what the enemy had prepared for. Stood at the back, invisible again, until the Admiral entered and shattered the silence. "Morgan has identified a pattern that changes everything." All eyes turned. The weight of hostility pressed against her, but she walked forward, her laptop under her arm, her grandfather's lesson steady in her veins. She connected cables, pulled up maps, overlays, images. "This isn't terrorism," she said. "It's choreography. The same choreography from Morocco, 1978. Identical entry points, identical blackout protocols, even the deadline." Skepticism rippled through the room, but she pushed on. Split screens filled the wall, 1978 Morocco on the left, Azerbaijan on the right. Ambush sites mirrored like a reflection across decades. "If we move by standard procedure," she concluded, "we will lose every operator we send. They're not improvising. They're following a playbook written specifically to defeat us." His face hardened. "With all due respect, Commander, this isn't a history lecture, unless you've been in the field." Cut him off, her voice low, cold. I don't need to jump out of helicopters to recognize ZU-23 anti-aircraft positions buried in the architecture, the same weapons that just shredded your men. The room went silent. A Delta captain spoke up quietly. "She's right, sir. The ambush was too precise," they knew. For the first time, faltered. He stared at the imagery, processing, resisting, fighting the truth his instincts already knew. Harrison ended it. "Colonel, Morgan is joining your planning team. Full operational overhaul within 4 hours." Salute was crisp, his glare toward was sharper. "My office, 10 minutes." It wasn't an invitation, it was a threat. As the room emptied, leaned in. "Well," she said softly, "you certainly made an impression." Gathered her laptop. "'S a good officer. Once he processes the evidence, he'll adapt." Raised an eyebrow, optimistic. Didn't answer. She was already thinking of the man in the hallway, the one with the soldier's posture who had vanished before she could follow. Coincidence? Never. By the time she left the building that night, she had switched cars twice, doubled her route, left her phone in a delivery truck. Every instinct screamed the same truth. She was being watched. The farm was supposed to be safe. 30 miles west of, hidden under layers of countryside stillness. Her grandfather's land, her childhood home, her private stronghold. But as she turned onto the narrow access road, headlights off, she saw them. Tire tracks, fresh, too heavy for locals, too recent for chance. The farm was compromised. She parked half a mile out, slipped into the woods in hand. Every path, every shadow was muscle memory from childhood drills. She reached the barn through a hidden culvert emerging beneath hay bales. She listened. 2 voices, professional cadence, not intruders, operatives. Her grandfather's filing cabinet waited, marked crop rotation 1975-1980. She unlocked it with the key she wore like a necklace, pulled the file. Morocco 1978, photographs, documents, and one image that froze her blood. Her grandfather, a young Harrison, and a tall man with Slavic features. On the back, in careful handwriting, Thomas Bill Alexander Rabat, 1978. Voices neared. She closed the file, replaced it, slid into the tunnel again. As she sealed the hatch above her, one voice floated down. "Check the office, anything on Prometheus or Morgan." They knew her name. She emerged half a mile away, breath fogging in the night. From the trees she saw their SUV, diplomatic plates, Russian Federation. Her car had been checked. She didn't approach it. Instead, she melted into the woods, toward the emergency cabin her grandfather had taught her never to forget. Inside, beneath floorboards, she found the old contingency kit. Cash, IDs, a prepaid satellite phone. She called with the number etched into memory. "Davis Fuel," came the gravelly voice. "It's," she said. "The farm. Compromised." "Cabin 17, he replied, code confirming his safety. Then, "Jack's playing chess at diner. Special game tonight." Translation: Jack, ex-CIA Moscow chief, was at his. The emergency network was active. Ended the call, destroyed the phone, scattered its pieces. The farm had been theirs for decades. Its compromise was no accident, which meant someone had told them, which meant someone in that briefing room had already betrayed her. The Cold War wasn't history, it was here, it was alive, and now it was hunting her. Why was her name, written in a file meant to be burned decades ago? The question haunted as she approached the gas station at Davis Fuel and Service, its neon sign sputtering weakly in the night. To any passerby, it looked abandoned, a relic of a slower America, its pumps rusted, its windows streaked with dirt. But she knew better. This place had been a node in her grandfather's hidden network, a place where secrets could cross borders without leaving digital footprints. The back door creaked softly as she entered. The smell of oil and old coffee lingered. Behind a desk stacked with paper ledgers sat Jack. 82 years old, former CIA Moscow chief, the kind of man whose eyes still carried the sharpness of an era where a single slip could start a nuclear war. They hit the farm, said, no time for courtesy. Russian plates, American accents. They knew exactly what to look for. Prometheus, Department 5. Didn't look surprised. He only leaned back, hands folded. I've activated the old network. 3 separate surveillance teams spotted at JSOC exits right after your briefing. They're watching you, specifically you. She pulled out the photographs from the Morocco file. Her grandfather, a young Harrison, and the tall Slavic man. She laid it on the desk. Alexander, my grandfather, wrote his name. His eyes flickered with something rare, unease. He reached for a filing cabinet, an envelope sealed with wax. The crest was unmistakable, her grandfather. He left this with me, said. Told me it was only to be opened if the pattern ever returned. A Department V operation, a Prometheus signal. Inside was a leather-bound address book. The paper crackled as flipped to the letter V. Alexander, Security Consultants International, 1701 Pennsylvania Avenue. When winter wakes, the game resumes. She traced the handwriting with her fingers, her grandfather's steady script. Who is he, Jack? His jaw tightened. Was KGB Department V sabotage, disruption, long-game operations, hand-picked for loyalty, except he wasn't what he appeared to be. Frowned, a double agent. Not quite, more of a realist, said. In 1974, he approached your grandfather with intelligence about a Department V operation that could trigger nuclear war. Thomas stopped it. They worked together after that, unofficially, quietly. For 15 years, those 2 men, enemies by nationality, partners by necessity, prevented more flashpoints than most presidents even knew existed. Absorbed this, her chest tight. All her life she'd heard fragments of stories about her grandfather's Cold War exploits, but never this. Never that he had worked with a KGB man. And Harrison, she asked. Brought in for operational support when CIA couldn't move officially. Your grandfather trusted him. That meant something. Her fingers hovered over his address, and after the collapse. Officially retired, unofficially disappeared. Some say consultant, some say Kremlin advisor, but if Prometheus is moving, then is part of it, either as its architect or its last firewall. His throat tightened, the farm, the photograph, the shadows at JSOC, everything converged. I need to talk to him. His eyes narrowed. That's a risk you can't measure. It's a risk I don't have time not to take. Before could argue, lifted the secure phone from his desk and dialed the number listed in the address book. The line clicked after 3 rings, an accented voice, elderly but steady. Security Consultants International. Her breath caught. This is Morgan. My grandfather was Thomas Morgan. A pause long enough for her heart to pound twice. Then, yes, Thomas spoke of you often. Another pause, the faintest hint of something unsaid. I have been expecting your call. Her pulse thudded. Winter has awakened, she said carefully, repeating the code phrase. Indeed, replied, and the game board is already in motion. We must meet. I'm operational now. Azerbaijan, I don't have time. I know, interrupted. Your presentation at JSOC has already stirred certain circles. They are moving against you. The farm was only the beginning. Her blood chilled. How do you know about the farm? Because I still have sources within the systems I helped create. A faint rustling in the background. What do you know of Prometheus? Only that it was designed to outlive the Soviet Union. Not just outlive, said, to thrive in its absence. A network of sleepers placed decades ago. Their mission, wait, decades if necessary, activate when the West was weakest, not militarily but internally, divided, distracted. That time is now. Felt the room tilt around her. Azerbaijan wasn't the mission, it was the smokescreen. Where, she asked. Chesapeake cabin, 8 hours, alone, armed, trust no one in your command structure until then. The line went dead. She lowered the receiver, her pulse still hammering, was watching her carefully. What did he say? That winter's awake, and the fire's already spreading. Exhaled slowly as if bracing against an old ghost. Your grandfather feared this more than anything else. Not Soviet missiles, not battlefield losses, Prometheus. Her phone buzzed, a message from Walker. Demanding your presence. Satellite confirms hostage takers repositioning, exactly as you predicted. Even here, even in this storm of shadows, the immediate mission still pressed like a blade at her throat. 12 lives, 12 hostages, and now the knowledge that saving them was only a fraction of the war she was walking into. She rose, tucking the photograph and the address book into her pack. His gaze followed her, sharp, paternal. He said, voice gravel, "Be careful who you trust, even Harrison." She paused at the door, the words striking deep. "You think he's compromised?" "I think ideology doesn't die. It only finds new uniforms." The cold outside bit her cheeks as she stepped back into the night. The road stretched out ahead, dark veins pulsing through the Virginia countryside. Her instincts screamed she was being watched, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. At JSOC was waiting. His hostility was gone, replaced with something more dangerous, grim necessity. He handed her an encrypted tablet. "Your assessment was right. Hostage takers repositioned exactly as you said. We need new vectors." There it was, a reluctant respect. He didn't apologize, men like didn't, but the shift was real. He trusted her now, even if only with the mission. As she worked, her mind split in two. One half calibrating vectors, recalculating insertion, refining rescue plans. The other replaying words, a network of sleepers, decades in waiting, now awake. 12 hostages, or an entire Western collapse. Which mattered more, which came first? Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper through memory. Sometimes you don't get to choose between the urgent and the important. Sometimes they're the same thing, dressed in different uniforms. When she finally looked up from the tactical display, her reflection in the dark screen startled her. Calm eyes, steady breath, but beneath it, the quiet rage of someone who had been ignored too long, underestimated too deeply, and now found herself carrying a war no one else believed existed. Outside the secure glass, the command center pulsed with activity. Operators prepared, gear was loaded, lives for risk. Pressed her palm flat against the screen, as if steadying herself on a surface that couldn't hold her weight. Prometheus was real, and it wasn't coming, it was here. What kind of man waits 30 years to move a single piece on the board? The question carried down narrow back roads in the cold pre-dawn. Her headlights stayed off for most of the drive, her path traced by moonlight and memory. She switched vehicles twice, left false trails, doubled back more times than she could count. Counter-surveillance wasn't caution anymore. It was survival. The Chesapeake Bay shimmered faintly in the distance when she finally saw it. A cabin, weathered wood, white trim, chimney sending a thin stream of smoke into the gray morning. To anyone else it looked like a forgotten fishing retreat. To her, it was a place she'd only heard of in fragments of her grandfather's stories. The cabin where no one could lie because every word cost both sides too much. She circled the property for 20 minutes before approaching, every sense sharpened to a blade. Footprints in the mud fresh, a trail of smoke from the chimney. Someone was already here. The door opened before she could knock. Alexander filled the frame. He was taller than she expected, shoulders still straight despite his 70-plus years. His hair, cut short, was silver, his face lined, but his pale blue eyes were piercing, alive. A man still assessing, still calculating, still playing. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed oddly out of place against the rustic backdrop, yet perfectly in character for someone who had lived his life in contradictions. "Morgan," he said in a low voice touched by accent, "you have your grandfather's eyes, and his caution. I watched you circle the property." "Habit," she replied. A habit that has kept you alive. He stepped back. Please, we have little time. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and sea air. Sparse furniture, heavy with history. A chess board sat by the window, pieces arranged mid-game. Froze at the sight. The position, knight threatening queen and rook, was identical to the board in her grandfather's study. Our last game, said, noticing her gaze. We played it by courier years after the collapse. This position was never finished. Studied him, friends. His face was unreadable. We began as adversaries, became reluctant collaborators, friends. Perhaps too dangerous a word, but your grandfather and I understood each other in ways few men ever could. He reached into his jacket slowly, carefully, and placed a small object on the table between them. A chess piece, black knight, onyx carved with details so fine it seemed alive. From the set we played with in Berlin, 1974, said. He would want you to have it now, for the end game. Her hand hovered over it but did not touch. Colonel called you a double agent, said you designed Prometheus. His expression didn't flicker. A simplification, but not entirely false. I was Department V in 1969. We designed Prometheus as a framework for defeating the West long after open war was impossible. Sleeper assets buried deep, timelines measured not in years but in generations. My role was design, but I left before activation. What changed? She asked. 1973, the Arab-Israeli War. I saw how close the world came to nuclear exchange, how eager were on both sides to risk annihilation. I realized the enemy was not capitalism nor communism. It was ideology itself, men willing to burn the world for abstract victory. Swallowed, her throat dry. So you approached my grandfather. In Berlin, 1974. He did not trust me, but he the intelligence I gave him. Together we stopped operations too dangerous to allow continuation. Quietly, outside any chain of command. He understood that sometimes the only way to protect an institution was to operate beyond it. His voice grew harder. When the Soviet Union collapsed, I gave Thomas everything I knew about Prometheus. We believed we stopped it, but Prometheus was built with redundancies within redundancies. We killed one serpent head, others lay dormant. Now they rise. He slid a folder across the table. Opened it. Maps, targets, lists, Brussels Security Conference, NATO communication nodes, American financial systems, nuclear command and control. Her heart stuttered. These are the objectives, said. Azerbaijan was never the goal. It is Morocco 1978 all over again. Diversion, noise. The real strike comes in 72 hours. 3 vectors simultaneous designed to paralyze the West at its core. She flipped through the documents. The precision terrified her. Not fantasy, not guesswork. Calculations updated for the modern age as if someone had been tending this fire all along. Who, she demanded, who is running it? Pulled out a photograph. A severe-looking man, eyes like stone. Former Department V director, true believer. He never abandoned the cause. 30 years positioning assets. Now he coordinates activation from Washington itself. Felt her pulse hammer in her temples. Why now? Because now you are distracted, said simply. Your intelligence agencies dismantled Cold War units after 9/11. You focused on terrorism, not counterintelligence. Your experts retired. Institutional memory decayed, has waited for this moment. And now his pieces are in place. She pressed her hand against the table, grounding herself against the weight of what she was hearing. And you, which side are you on? Leaned forward, his pale eyes cutting into hers. The same side as your grandfather, the side that prevents catastrophe. I will not see ideology burn the world to ash. Her instincts screamed against him. Every lesson of her training warned her not to trust a man like this. And yet, everything he said aligned with the fragments her grandfather had left, the patterns she herself had seen. Then we stop it, she said. Yes, but unofficially, outside your chains of command. Your JSOC has already been penetrated, is only one, placed others. Trust no one until we root them out. He slid a secure satellite phone across the table. Direct line, only to me, untraceable. She pocketed it. As she rose, added quietly, your grandfather taught me something. Winning is irrelevant. Preventing destruction is all that matters. Remember that. Her hand brushed the black knight in her pocket, heavy, cold, silent. I'll remember, she said. When she left, the morning sun had just broken over the bay, painting the cabin gold. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, but knew better. Peace was just the quiet between strikes. Back at JSOC, the gears of war kept turning. Operation Neptune, the embassy rescue, 6 hours until launch. Colonel moved with grim efficiency, implementing her recommendations completely. No one officer held the full plan, deception vectors already in motion. Harrison intercepted her near the command center. His eyes scanned her face with the kind of insight only earned through decades. You met him, he said. Froze. Don't look so surprised, Harrison continued. Your grandfather trusted me. I know about the cabin, about the games, about. Then you know what's coming, she said. I know enough, Harrison replied. His voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was iron. Neptune launches in 6 hours. Hostages must be saved. After that, he leaned closer. You do whatever is necessary to counter Prometheus, official or not. Nodded, her chest tight. Her grandfather had once told her that the most dangerous battles were the ones no one ever knew had been fought. Now she understood what he meant. As she walked into the operations floor, the mission map glowed across the screens. Red, blue, yellow, lives and risks reduced to pixels. She touched the black knight in her pocket, a piece long dormant, now moving. The endgame had begun. Why do victories feel hollow the moment they arrive? The question burned in his chest as she stood in the command center, watching the countdown clock bleed seconds into history. 6 hours had become 4. 4 had become 2. Now less than 1 remained before Operation Neptune launched. The embassy in Baku looked ghostly on the screen, live drone feeds in black and white, capturing every flicker of shadow, every ripple of movement. Inside, 12 hostages waited, hooded, bound, terrified. The charges strapped to their walls were crude but devastating. Enough C4 to reduce them to dust before any team could cut a single rope. Operators stood ready in the hangar, black fatigues, eyes sharp. They didn't need speeches. They needed precision, and that was what gave them. No roof insertion, she said firmly, pointing at the overlays. They've rigged Zu-23s to target any inbound chopper. Instead, sewer vector here, breach here, extraction through side corridor. Timed with a blackout I can trigger remotely. Her voice carried steady authority, though her stomach coiled tight. These weren't theories. Every recommendation meant lives saved or lost. Bristled but said nothing. He had already learned what happened when he ignored her. Instead, he relayed orders with clipped efficiency, his grudging respect unspoken but real. The Admiral watched quietly from the back, hands folded, face unreadable. Walker stayed by his side, scanning screens, backing her analysis. For the first time, felt the strange weight of trust, fragile, dangerous but real. Then the launch. Black-clad shadows moved through the Azerbaijani night. Drones hummed above, satellites aligned. The sewer entry worked. Silent, invisible. Watched them advance through grainy feeds, every heartbeat of theirs mirrored in her chest. Her fingers danced across the console. She triggered the blackout. Entire city blocks fell into darkness, vanishing in sequence like stars going out. Breach, staggered charges, muffled thunder. Operators poured in, silent and surgical, held her breath as the hostages came into view, bound, shaking, alive. Status green, one operator whispered over comms. Then gunfire, a sudden storm of precision bursts, not panicked, not sloppy, trained fire. The enemy had been waiting. Cursed under his breath. Contact, how the hell? His mind raced. The positions, the timing, it was Morocco all over again. The same pattern they knew. She grabbed the comm. Alpha team, shift flank now. They've mirrored the Morocco ambush vectors. If you stay, you'll be cut to pieces. Shot her a glare but didn't countermand. Seconds later, the operators shifted, breaking the kill box before it snapped shut. Precision fire still lit the darkness, but the trap collapsed, forcing the attackers into retreat. 2 men wounded, none dead, the hostages still alive. His chest surged with relief, but it didn't last. One of the attackers broke from cover, sprinting through the smoke. Zoomed the feed, heart pounding. His face flickered into focus. Young, hard eyes, but the insignia on his jacket, faint, blurred, was Russian military issue. Not scavenged, not improvised, official. Her throat tightened. She looked at Harrison. He saw it too. He gave the slightest nod, confirmation, proof. Target down, came the report seconds later. The young man fell, crimson blooming across his chest. His insignia vanished with him into the dust. The hostages were secured, herded toward extraction. C4 disarmed, victory declared. But felt only unease, because victories this clean never stayed clean for long. Back at JSOC, cheers erupted in the operations floor. Operators clapped each other's shoulders, adrenaline bright in their eyes. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted. But stayed apart, her gaze fixed on the frozen frame of the Russian insignia. Proof of state involvement. Proof that Azerbaijan was never about terrorists. It was Prometheus testing its pieces. Came to her side, voice low. You saved them. Without you, they'd be gone. Forced a nod. She wanted to feel pride, relief, anything but this gnawing certainty that the real storm hadn't even begun. Approached, his posture was stiff, his expression unreadable. For a moment she expected another dismissal. Instead, he extended his hand. Respect where it's due, he said simply. You were right. She took his hand, her grip firm. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Later in the debrief chamber, the operators filed in one by one. Listened, noted every detail, filled in the gaps. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying words, his name, the shadow network waking up. When the room emptied, Harrison remained. His face was grave, eyes fixed on the insignia frozen on the screen. They won't contain this, he said softly. Not the Pentagon, not the White House. They'll bury it. Pretend it was rogue, because admitting the truth means admitting we've been blind for 30 years. Swallowed hard. What if Prometheus is already inside? What if the people burying it are part of it? The Admiral looked at her for a long moment. Then he said what no commander ever should. Then we fight outside the chain. Silence settled heavy between them. She understood the weight of what he was saying. Unofficial, unacknowledged. A war fought in the shadows, without banners, without protection. Her chest tightened. She thought of her father, of her grandfather, of the legacy they'd left her, not medals or monuments, but unfinished battles and ghosts that refused to sleep. She stepped outside into the night air. The sky was clear, stars sharp against the black. For a fleeting moment, she let herself breathe. Then her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Satellite encryption, the one had given her. She answered, voice steady, Morgan. His voice came through, quiet, urgent. You did well tonight, but Azerbaijan was only rehearsal, has moved. Washington, Brussels, Berlin. The real strike begins in 72 hours, and his pause was heavy. They will come for you first. The line went dead. Lowered the phone, her heart cold. Around her the base hummed with celebration, but she knew the truth. This wasn't the end of a mission. It was the beginning of a war. She touched the black knight in her pocket, its onyx surface cool against her skin. Her grandfather's piece, his gift, the symbol of unfinished games. And she whispered to herself, barely audible against the night. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, in a war no one admits exists? The question kept awake long after the embassy celebration died down. Outside, laughter still echoed in the hangars. Men and women who had risked everything toasted survival. For them, the battle was over. For her, it was just beginning. She sat alone in her quarters, the black night turning over in her hand. A piece from another lifetime, a symbol of unfinished games. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper through the silence. Endgames aren't won by strength. They're survived by patience. But patience was a luxury she didn't have. The secure phone vibrated again. Midnight call. Has activated, he said, voice clipped, urgent. Tonight was diversion. Washington is already moving. Look at your own markets, your systems. He's inside. Opened her laptop, routing through encrypted tunnels, her fingers racing. Stock indexes, energy grids, comms. And there it was, anomalies. Small, deliberate, almost invisible, but unmistakable. A network probing, testing, inserting itself into systems that should have been untouchable. Her breath caught. Cyber intrusion. Not just intrusion, corrected. Insertion. Once planted, it spreads. By morning, your financial arteries will bleed. Panic will spread faster than bullets. She closed her eyes, exhaling slow. A different kind of war, not bombs, not bullets, collapse by quiet keystrokes. Why me? She asked softly. Why tell me? Why not the agencies, the governments? You already know the answer, said. Because they are compromised, placed sleepers decades ago. Some are awake, some are waiting. You cannot know who is who, but you, his voice softened just slightly. Your grandfather believed in you, so do I. The line clicked dead. She sat frozen, the night heavy in her hand. One piece, one symbol, and an enemy spanning continents. By dawn, the first cracks appeared. News tickers scrolled, unexplained outages in East Coast grids, banking delays across Europe, communications breakdown in NATO servers. Technical issues, the official reports called them, but knew better. In the Admiral's office, the atmosphere was heavier than the morning fog outside. Harrison listened as she laid out warning, the anomalies, the proof. Not testing anymore, she said. He's beginning. The Azerbaijan mission was rehearsal. This is the real strike. Harrison's face was stone. Do you have evidence it's him? She hesitated. A single hesitation, but Harrison caught it. Not evidence, she admitted. Not yet, but the patterns are identical to Department V doctrine. My grandfather saw them. I see them. It's Prometheus. Without proof, Washington will bury this, Harrison said. His jaw tightened, so we don't go through Washington. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Then Harrison leaned back, eyes narrowing. You understand what you're saying? I do, said. We fight off the books, we fight like they do, quiet, unofficial. Walker leaned forward, her tone sharp. That's treason. Once you step outside, you can't come back, not without blood on your hands. Met her eyes. Treason to who? To a compromised system, or to the men who'll die if we stay silent. The silence stretched again. Harrison broke it. What do you need? Her throat tightened. Access, names, resources, a team that won't blink when orders aren't sanctioned. Harrison nodded slowly, like a man measuring the weight of inevitability. You'll have them, but understand this. If you fail, no one will know you tried. If you succeed, no one will thank you. Almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Story of my career. That night, the rogue operation began. Her team was small, sharp and steady. 2 operators from his unit who had seen enough to believe her, and too old for field work but still sharp as broken glass, feeding them intel from his quiet network of ghosts. They moved quietly, tracking digital traces, false identities, bank accounts spiderwebbed through shell corporations. Every line pointed back to, every lead confirmed the nightmare. And then came the proof. burst into the tablet in hand, face pale. Intercepted comms, high-level Russian cipher, crossed with NATO server anomalies. Look. On the screen, 3 targets emerged. Brussels, Berlin, Washington, simultaneous strikes 72 hours, blueprint. Pulse hammered, proof, real undeniable proof. But with proof came danger. Within an hour the perimeter tripped, motion sensors, shadows where none should be. Move, hissed, grabbing her pack. Gunfire tore through the windows before she finished the word. Precision shots, suppressors, not amateurs. Her team scrambled, returning fire, retreating through the back. Covered, her jaw clenched, her eyes steady even as rounds shredded drywall inches from her face. They slipped into the night, vanishing down alleys, hearts pounding. By the time they regrouped at an abandoned warehouse, 2 things were clear, new, and someone close had betrayed them. Slammed her fist against the table. We were burned inside an hour, that's not chance. Someone fed them. Silence, no one spoke, no one dared. His voice crackled through comms, weary but sharp. Listen to me. You cannot save everyone. You cannot close every hole. Has had decades. You've had days, but if you can cut the head, the body will wither. Focus. Her chest heaved, her pulse racing. Focus. Cut the head. But what if the head wore an American uniform? Touched her arm, steady. We're still with you. Met her eyes. For the first time she let the fear show. Not fear of dying, fear of failing. Fear of watching history repeat itself because no one listened, just like in 1978. She swallowed hard. Then we hit fast. Before the strike goes live, we cut the head. Her voice shook once, then steadied. Unofficially. The plan began to form, fragile but sharp. Washington first, then Europe, a race against the clock. But beneath every calculation, every map, every vector, the same question haunted her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. What if the traitor isn't outside? What if the betrayal has been beside me all along? What if the traitor was sitting across the table all along? The thought clawed its mind as she moved through the hushed corridors of Washington, her footsteps light, her senses sharpened. The city was quiet, asleep. But beneath its marble monuments and glowing domes, something monstrous was moving. Her team was small now, stripped to the bone. At her side, steady as always. 2 operators, silent shadows trained for missions that never made headlines. Fed intel from his apartment 2 blocks away, fingers flying across dusty terminals that still hummed with Cold War secrets. And at the center of it all, he wasn't a ghost anymore. He was here in this city, in reach. Intelligence had narrowed the trail to a brownstone near Circle. From the outside, it looked ordinary lawyers' offices by day, empty by night. But saw the truth in its shadows, the subtle layers of surveillance, the unnatural stillness around it. She crouched in the alley, whispering into comms. 2 guards front, rooftop watch, internal sensors on ground level, standard counterintelligence grid. His voice was steady. You've beaten worse. Maybe, muttered, but they weren't waiting for me by name. They moved, silent, precise, scaling fire escapes, neutralizing sentries with suppressed bursts. Inside, the air smelled of dust and fresh paint, a disguise layered over something darker. His heart pounded as they descended into the basement. Every instinct screamed they were walking into the center of something vast, something alive. And then they found it. Rows of servers, monitors flickering with cascading code, maps of Europe glowing in crimson overlays, timelines, countdowns, vectors, proof that the strike was real, imminent, unstoppable unless they cut the head. And at the far end of the room, he was older than his photograph but not diminished. His presence filled the room, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes like shards of obsidian. He did not look startled. He looked expectant. So, said in perfect English, his voice smooth as oil, Thomas Morgan's granddaughter, at last. Raised her weapon. It's over. He smiled faintly. On the contrary, it has only begun. Behind her, one of the operators shifted, too slow, too hesitant. His gut twisted. She turned just as he swung his weapon toward her. Betrayal. The room erupted in chaos. Gunfire ripped the air. Sparks cascaded from shattered servers. Screamed her name, dragging her into cover as rounds tore the wall inches from her head. The traitor was inside her team, a sleeper, placed decades ago just as warned. His face had been beside hers for days. His silence had masked his allegiance. And now he was the blade aimed at her throat. Her chest heaved. The operators loyal to her fired back, precision cutting down 2 guards. But the traitor moved with brutal efficiency, forcing them deeper into the room, closer to. You see, his voice carried easily through the smoke and thunder. You cannot know who to trust. Prometheus is not men. It is memory. It is loyalty written into blood. Your grandfather fought us and still we waited. Still we grew. You cannot win. You can only choose how you fall. Her vision blurred. The noise, the betrayal, the crushing weight of inevitability. For a heartbeat, she wanted to collapse, to let it end. But then she felt the black knight in her pocket, hard and cold against her hand. A piece from a game her grandfather never finished. A reminder that some battles weren't meant to be won cleanly, but carried forward, one move at a time. She gritted her teeth, rising into the storm. Not tonight, she whispered. She fired. 2 rounds snapped past his head close enough to slice his composure. He flinched, rage flashing in his dark eyes. The servers behind him sparked, screens shattering into static. The fight turned brutal. Close quarters. Slammed the traitor against the wall, their weapons clattering to the floor. His eyes burned with fanatic devotion, as if Prometheus lived in his veins. Why? She hissed through clenched teeth. His lips curled into a bloody smile. Because you already lost, you just don't know it yet. She drove her elbow into his throat, dropped him cold. Covered her flank, eyes wide with fury and fear. We have to move. But's gaze locked on. He stood across the room, calm despite the wreckage, his hand resting casually on a laptop still humming with code. Strike continues, he said simply. Servers are redundant. Kill me or don't, it changes nothing. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed to end him now. But another voice echoed in her head. Cut the head and the body withers. But what if this wasn't the head? What if killing him only crowned another? Her breath shook. She lowered her weapon just slightly, enough to think, enough to breathe. We're not done, she said. Smile returned, cold and cruel. No, we are only moving to the next piece. The operators dragged her back. Grenades detonated, tearing the room apart in flame and debris. They escaped through smoke and ruin, barely alive. When they stumbled into the night air, his chest felt hollow. They had proof. They had survived, but had slipped away. And worse, she no longer knew who she could trust. In the warehouse hours later, bandaged her arm where shrapnel had torn through. Silence stretched heavy between them, broken only by the hum of his voice through comms. You did well, he said. You lived. That's enough for tonight. Not enough, whispered. Not when the strike's still alive. Her eyes burned. For the first time, tears threatened. Not weakness, grief. For the men lost, for the betrayal at her side, for the gnawing truth that maybe was right. But she didn't let the tears fall. She pressed them back, swallowing the ache. Because she knew this, she could break. She could bleed, she could fall, but she could not stop. The knight was still in her pocket, heavy, cold, waiting. And so was the end game. What do you do when every move feels like your last? The question pressed against his chest as the C-17 droned over the Atlantic, its cargo bay silent except for the hum of engines and the steady breathing of the few who still stood with her. Sat across, arms folded, gaze distant. The 2 operators checked their weapons with mechanical calm. His voice flickered faintly through her headset from Washington, and in her pocket the Black Knight rested, a cold reminder that the endgame was waiting. Hadn't lied, the servers destroyed in Washington hadn't mattered. His strike plan lived elsewhere, redundant, distributed, alive. And now the vectors converged, Brussels, Berlin, and Washington again. A simultaneous fracture. If they hit, panic would cascade, markets collapse, NATO splinter. A West 2 fractured to recover. Their target, Brussels. Intelligence pointed to a control node hidden beneath a government conference center. The NATO Security Summit was scheduled for that morning. Delegates, ministers, and generals from across the alliance would gather, unaware that beneath their feet, a digital knife waited to sever their world. The plane touched down in Belgium just before dawn. Cold air bit her face as she stepped into the gray light, her breath misting in the chill. Every nerve in her body felt raw, alive. She could sense time slipping through her fingers. The city still slept, cobblestones slick with rain. The team moved fast, blending into shadows, avoiding cameras, skirting checkpoints. Pulse drummed as they neared the conference center, a grand building draped in banners, flags of unity fluttering in the breeze. But unity was an illusion. Beneath the building, Prometheus pulsed. Inside, the air was sterile, humming with preparations for the summit. Security bustled. Staff hurried. None of them knew they were walking over a mine. Teams slipped into service corridors, descending deeper until the walls turned to concrete and the air grew colder. And then they saw it, a bunker lined with racks of servers, code streaming across monitors, red lights blinking in sync like a heartbeat. And at the center stood. This time he wasn't alone. 2 guards flanked him, and beside him froze. Older but unmistakable, his pale eyes locked with hers, unreadable. Her stomach dropped. No. His voice filled the bunker, smooth, triumphant. You never understood, was never your ally. He was Prometheus. He always was. Her pulse roared in her ears. She wanted to deny it, scream, rage, but silence cut deeper than any words. He didn't flinch, didn't protest. He only watched her, calm, as if he'd already accepted the role history had written for him. He gave you the night, continued. A token, a lure, a way to pull you into the game your grandfather started but never finished. Her chest heaved, betrayal on betrayal. Was it true? Or another manipulation? She searched his face for the smallest flicker of truth. Finally he spoke. His voice was soft, tired. Prometheus was my creation, your grandfather knew. He fought me. But he also understood the inevitability. I am not your enemy, I am the truth. The world cannot survive endless ideologies tearing it apart. Prometheus is not destruction, it is correction. She shook her head, backing away. Correction. You call crashing economies, killing innocents, tearing nations apart correction. His eyes held hers, unwavering. Your world is already collapsing. You only cling to the illusion of strength. We break it so it can be rebuilt. Smiled faintly. And you are the last obstacle. You can join us, or you can fall as your grandfather did. Her weapon trembled in her hands. Rage burned in her chest, but beneath it, grief. Grief for her grandfather's memory twisted, for the trust she'd placed in shattered, for the gnawing truth that maybe, in some broken way, he believed what he was saying. His whisper broke the silence. We don't have time. The summit starts in less than an hour. If we don't kill the servers, it's over. His heart pounded. The servers, the guards, too many choices, not enough time. Her grandfather's words echoed. Sometimes you don't get to choose between the urgent and the important. Sometimes they're the same thing, dressed in different uniforms. She steadied her breath. One choice, one move. She looked at. If you ever meant a word you said to him, to my grandfather, then you'll know why I can't let you win. His expression shifted. For the first time, regret flickered in his pale eyes. And in that instant she fired. The round struck not but the servers. Sparks exploded, code flickered, alarms screamed. The guards opened fire. Chaos tore the bunker apart. dragged into cover as bullets ricocheted off concrete. The operators returned fire, taking down one guard, then another. Roared in fury, lunging for the laptop. Broke cover, charging him. They collided, the laptop clattering to the floor. His strength was crushing, his grip like iron. But she fought with something deeper, not ideology, not vengeance, but the refusal to surrender her world to men who believed only in control. They grappled, slammed into the console, sparks erupting around them. His hand clamped around her throat, squeezing. Her vision blurred, darkness closing in. And then moved. For the first time he chose. He seized his arm, wrenching him back. The old man's voice was hoarse, filled with something had never heard in him before: desperation. Enough. Turned, shock flashing across his face. In that moment, tore free, grabbed her weapon and fired. Staggered, blood blooming dark across his chest. His eyes burned with rage as he collapsed, his voice a hiss. You cannot kill Prometheus. It lives. Silence followed, deafening. Stood motionless, staring at the body of his comrade, his creation, his shadow. His shoulders sagged. For the first time he looked old, truly old. Kept her weapon trained on him, her breath ragged. Why? She demanded. He met her gaze. Because your grandfather was right. Sometimes destruction is all ideology deserves, even mine. Alarms blared louder. Self-destruct systems kicked in. The bunker shook with the rumble of collapsing circuits. Grab's arm, we have to go. For a heartbeat hesitated. She looked at enemy, ally, betrayer, savior. A man who had built the fire and then, at the last moment, chosen to smother it. His eyes softened. Go, survive, that is your move. She turned, ran. They burst into the daylight as the bunker erupted behind them, fire belching from the ground, smoke curling into the Brussels sky. Sirens wailed. Security forces scrambled. Confusion reigned. Collapsed against a wall, lungs burning, body trembling. The world had not ended, not today. But she knew's last words were true. Prometheus wasn't dead, not entirely. Its embers lived in shadows, in men and women still waiting. This battle was won. The war would stretch on. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the black knight. Its surface was cracked now, scorched by fire, but still whole. She turned it over in her palm, feeling the weight of unfinished games. Touched her shoulder, grounding her. You did it. Shook her head softly. No, we only delayed it. But maybe that's all victory ever is, delaying the fire long enough for someone else to breathe. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The camera of history would never see her. The headlines would never name her. The world would never know how close it had come to collapse. But in the silence after the storm, understood what her grandfather had always known. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about refusing to lose. And in that refusal, dignity lives.